Where are we today, Phil?
On the Barbican, Plymouth Castle, which overlooks the Barbican. I was going to talk today about the evolution of Plymouth's early defences from the medieval period up until the English Civil War. I thought we'd start here at the castle because the early defences of Plymouth were up on the Hoe. They were a number of bulwarks set up to stop attack from the sea, usually from France. There was a lot of attacks from France in the medieval times during the 100 Years' War and our own Wars of the Roses. Pirates, these were. They came for an off-the-cuff raid to Plymouth. They would come in a number of boats. This castle was built to protect Plymouth Harbour, Sutton Harbour as it was called then. We had several piers down below, which we'll have a look at later. But this was built late 1300s, early 1400s. There's no exact information because a lot of our documentation for this castle has disappeared. It was a 4-turreted building, and when the threat came from abroad, the mayor and the aldermen and soldiers would man one of the 4 corners of these forts. There were 4 towers that represented Plymouth wards. Each ward would be manned by an alderman. One of the towers from the wards would man each tower and the cannon, and just wait and see what would happen in time of war. Right, I'm standing inside the castle now, what would have been the castle quadrant. I think it's one of the 4 towers. Now, each of these 4 towers, as I said, were manned by a different alderman and a number of soldiers. They were 2 stories high, roofed over, and they had artillery in place at some stage. The castle was here for a long time until it just fell into disuse after they built Plymouth Fort further out. Now, the 4 castles, each turret is represented on the coat of arms of Plymouth as the 4 original wards of Plymouth. So we're back outside the tower, and if you look here, this is the original limestone base that the castle was built on. This slowly crept down towards the seafront. The Barbican of the castle was around the other side, which led to the waterfront, hence this area known as the Barbican. It protected the 2 piers and entrance into Sutton Pool. So that was a good deterrent for an attacking force that comes into Plymouth. The ones that did come into Plymouth, these attacking forces, went around the Catwater side rather than come in. So this castle did its job at the time. And most people think this is all that's left of Plymouth Castle. But wait and see. This way. This is ridiculous. Oh. Fleur-de-lis on an old doorway. This is a piece of old walling, Steve, and I believe it's part of the castle. That's my opinion. It's been renovated, but I believe it's part of the old castle wall.
And what makes you think that, Phil?
It's just the design of the wall, the style of the wall. And if you compare it to the other parts that still exist, it looks very similar. I may be wrong, but that is, in my opinion, this is part of the old castle wall. This is the other side. It's quite a thick wall, and there's a buttress here. Quite a strong buttress that you find in a lot of old castles. Like I said, I may be wrong, but if there's somebody out there who knows better, please let me know. We'd be interested. We're now heading down towards the Barbican. to talk about what was down there at the time of the Civil War, and preceding that, obviously. So we'll go into those details when we get closer to the fort, which is the pier. This is an image of someone's idea of what Plymouth Castle looked like in the early days. It's got on date on there as 1665. This wall is apparently didn't exist. People say it did exist. Some people say it didn't. Like the Blackfriars in Plymouth, some say they existed, but they didn't. So there's a lot of sort of controversy about Plymouth, especially the castle during those days. The turret we've just had a look at could possibly be this one here on the right, the lower east turret. No one's really sure. It could be this one. We're not really sure. Nobody's really sure. But if you look at the lay of the land, it looks more probable that it is this one. But then that wall that we just had a look at wouldn't fit in with it. So it's all down to what people think, really. This wall, Bishop Vii's wall, it appears on some early maps, and on others it doesn't. So like I said, there's a lot of controversy around this wall. Some said it went all the way around the town. Others say it only went up as far as before it disappeared over the hill. So anybody coming in to attack Plymouth would see this part of the wall going up and be deterred by it and move in another direction to attack Plymouth.
So it'd be directly, more or less, up that hill?
Straight up the hill, yes. But to the left a bit further.
And it's huge.
It is, if it existed.
Why is it called Bishop Viii?
Because he's the one who sponsored it. Bishop of Exeter, I believe he was. Yeah. But you see it clearly there. Crenellated. Right, Steve, we're overlooking Sutton Harbour, and the piers, if you look down there, you see the two piers, or the three piers now. At the time of the medieval times when the castle was here, these piers were nowhere near this size. They were much smaller. And to stop any threat coming into Plymouth Harbour, Sutton Harbour, the Plymouth City built a chain across these piers. That would stop any boats entering the Sutton Harbour and force them around the other side to the Catwater. And this happened many times during Plymouth's early history. This and the castle above here, and there was also a blockhouse on the other side. Somewhere on the other side there was a blockhouse. Now, not necessarily made of stone. The sort of west blockhouse was made of stone, as you can see here, but the east blockhouse, it looks like a wooden building. So that might be what they were referring to as a blockhouse in the early days. You see the castle up here? This is where we are. We've just come from there, Plymouth Castle, and it is quite an extensive building, as I showed you. This is the Greyfriars here. This is St Andrew's Church, and that's the Whitefriars. Right, we're down on the Barbican now, down in front of the Fisherman's Mission in the Admiral McBride. If you look to your left, and then follow it down to the right, to the lantern by Castle Street, that is the extent of Plymouth Castle. This is the north to south front of Plymouth Castle that stood here in the 1400s. Quite an extensive building. You went up Castle Lane, and that, on the left of that, Castle Street, is where the Barbican stood, the actual entranceway into the Plymouth Castle that came down here. And like I said before, that's why this area is called the Barbican today. The original city water went right up to the Admiral McBride, and the original fish steps that the Mayflower passengers used to board their ship is behind this pub. So you can see that Plymouth Castle stood on quite a high promontory overlooking this area. The piers, the original piers that's in this picture, the West Pier, was along here, extended along here. Not where it is today, it's further back. This pier would have stood here. See the castle
we
above?
Just move around, folks?
Yeah, sure.
There we go.
See the castle? And that's the original pier which stood here. And it had holes for cannon.
Let's have a look.
And it was crenellated.
Let's have a look.
All right. Right, Steve, we've come down to the actual Barbican Pier now, the West Pier. And we're looking north across the water through all these masts towards where Breton side is, which you can't really see because of all these masts, but it's just over that area there where the old bus station was. Now, it's called Breton side for a reason. In 1403, a force of Bretons, 1,200 men on 30 ships, came towards Plymouth on a raid. Now, they saw the castle, they saw the chain across the boom, and there were cannons on the hoe. So they thought, rather than attack here, they would go up the Catwater. So they sailed up the Catwater, up the River Plym, and landed somewhere up there. Right, Steve, the Bretons, like I said, they sailed up past Captown, up the River Plym, landed somewhere along that area. They stopped for the night. This is in August 1403. They stopped for the evening, and in the morning they marched towards Plymouth and attacked the town on the north side, north of Plymouth, where roughly Breton side is, burning houses along the way. Obviously outside of Plymouth there were the odd houses, little tiny communities there of 3 or 4 houses, farmland. So they destroyed what they could and plundered. They came north of Plymouth. Now the defenders for Plymouth, the mayor and his aldermen and the soldiers, were in the castle because they thought they were to come back around the seafront, but they didn't. So during that period, a lot of the soldiers were sent to defend the town from the north. There was no wall around Plymouth in those days, so the Bretons had free reign, and they destroyed, the rumour was in the old days that they destroyed 600 houses, but I think that's an exaggeration. Now, the Plymouth men beat off these raiders and took a number of prisoners. They lost 89 men in Plymouth, but they said they took several hundred prisoners and forced the Bretons to withdraw. But I think they just withdrew on their own, took all their plunder, got back on their ships, sailed out, were fired upon by the castle, guns in the castle, and the guns that were put up on the hoe. So that was the end of that invasion. But the area you were asking me about earlier, Steve, Breton side, was named for that Breton invasion. They always called it Breton side, and there was a lane that was locally known as Catch French Lane for a long time, near Hill Street. Interesting, isn't it? Right, Steve, here's a picture of Plymouth, roughly at the period. It's obviously expanded since then. This is a Henry VIII map. Friary, like I said, the White Friars. The Bretons, as they came in for their attack in 1403 August, were put off by this, and they feared the guns in the castle. And as I said, they moved around the Catwater and came in. And this area, of north of Plymouth, between the White Friars, or the White Friars and St Andrews, they burnt a large part of this town here and pillaged and stole what they could before moving back out. They said they were forced away, but I don't think so myself. 1,200 mercenary soldiers from Brittany. No, they weren't defeated. They just withdrew. They got what they wanted. It was a short raid, a quick raid. This has happened many times in Plymouth's history before now. Before that period, 1403, and especially in the late 1300s. There was 3 recorded incidents that I've read about. So every year this happened, Plymouth had to strengthen its defences, and this is what happened. These were further strengthened when Henry VIII became king, which we'll talk about later. Just before we go to the Hoe, I thought we'll bring you up here and have a look at this place, these steps, Castle Street. This just confirms that this route here led up to the main gateway, the castle entrance, the main entrance into the castle. Going up here a little bit, I just think you might be interested to see this bit of stonework here. Could that possibly be part of the castle wall?
It's in the right place.
It's in the right place, Steve, and it looks the right date. It's been cemented back in, but see, they've built on top of it and around it, but they haven't covered that. So some of this castle still exists under this wall and under these steps.
It's like Plymouth's history.
Yeah.
It's hidden.
Hidden away. People don't want to know. Right, Steve, we're now right near Fisher's Nose, better known to some people as Elphinstone. Now, below, the castle is behind me, and what would have been later Plymouth Fort, and then later on the citadel, is to my right, up on the high ground. Now, Fisher's Nose is one of those fortifications ordered by Henry VIII to protect the coast of England. These blockhouses were contained cannon and small number of soldiers, and were built all around the coast of England, protecting rivers and waterways and coastline. Now, the ones in Plymouth start at Devil's Point, and then they come along. I've got a map here. I don't know if you can see it from there. Right, as I said, this is the blockhouse at Devil's Point. There would have been one over Mount Edgecombe. There's another one further up called the Artillery Tower now. And then there were two protecting the entrance to Mill Bay. And then you come along, there was a Henry VIII Tower went up here. It was known as Henry VIII Tower. And this is the one on Fisher's Nose.
So this is the one we're looking at here now?
Yeah, this is this corner of Fisher's Nose.
So let's just look. You hold there, Phil.
Yeah.
Yep, it looks pretty like it.
And these went all around the country, even down as far as Cornwall, to protect England from a seaborne invasion. Right, if you look at Fisher's Nose now, you see it's a substantial blockhouse, quite an extensive work. And there's arches, some this side, some the other side, low down for cannon. Now, cannon, obviously there to fire at the wooden ship's hulls and hopefully make a hole in they would sink. Later on, if you look higher up, there's an add-on and there's slits for muskets and rifles. This was built on after, and these arrow slits go quite a way around. Right, Steve, we're down in the car park below Dutton's Cafe. This underneath here is an old magazine. Now, we're not sure 100% when it was built, because I haven't seen inside, but Steve has been inside. He says arched roofs, vaulted roofs. But we'd like to know if anybody out there knows what it was and when it was built, actually, this part. And we're also confused by the shape of this end of the fortifications here. It's just an odd shape, just goes straight down. There's nothing in front of it. This was built up afterwards. So we're intrigued. There's a lot of parts of this building, the citadel and the old fort that was here before, that are intriguing.
The thing that interests me, Phil, is on the Hoe, which we'll see in a little while, on the site of the Corinthian Yacht Club, are two structures that are known to be fortifications that have exactly this, what I call pyramid type look to them, where the top is smaller than the bottom.
Yeah.
But if anyone has any information to confirm anything about this, we would love to hear.
Thank you. Right.
It's a lovely day here on the Barbican today.
Right, Steve, we're down below the citadel, still in the same car park. Now, before the citadel was built in the 1660s, a man called Robert Adams came to Plymouth in the early 1590s and decided we needed a fort. So he arranged to have this fort built. He designed this fort. It was called Plymouth Fort. It was started in the early 90s, 1590s, because it was thought better to protect Plymouth closer to the sea than let an invading force move up the river and attack the town from Catwater again. So this put the castle just to the left here, to the north, out of commission. By building Plymouth Fort, which was quite an extensive work, you can still see some of the crenellations up there of the original fort before they built the citadel. Most of it was knocked down to build the citadel, and the ground was levelled. Plymouth Fort was built in accordance with the landscape, and it came right down to the seafront. I've got a couple of pictures here. It was finished in the late 90s, 1590s, around 1596. But like I said, after that, Plymouth Castle went into decay. It was out of work. It was gone. From then on, the building deteriorated. People took stone from it. But it was revived again in the Civil War in the 1640s and used as a prison and an ammunition store. But Plymouth Fort was not the best design. And like I said, in the 1660s, it was superseded by the citadel, the Great Citadel, which was a much better. Plymouth, the walls were not high enough, they weren't organised, they were poorly sighted, the guns, so they knocked it down and decided to build the citadel, a much more substantial work. Right, Steve, here's an image of what Plymouth Fort might have looked like. This is not a map to scale, it's just an illustration of Plymouth Fort at the time, shortly after it was built. And if you look around it, there's a moat. And if you look at these three crenellations here, I believe that's those up there.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, that's what I believe. Firmly believe that that is part of the original. That is part of the original Plymouth Fort that was built there before the citadel.
It has to be.
Built on. Yeah, it was built on the land. They didn't change the land the style of the land there. The citadel did. They gouged out a lot of the soil and a lot of the rock to build the citadel. But Plymouth Fort was built to conform to the landscape. There was a moat around it, a drawbridge that leads down to the waterfront, obviously to get supplies in from boats. And there's the foreshore there. And if you look, this must be either Henry VIII's Tower or Fisher's Nose, one of these two. I'm looking at these two. Because that went right down to the seafront.
So that could be
one of the old towers.
The tower that we've just seen.
Yeah, it could be Fisher's Nose.
Yeah.
Because although it's tall there, it's shorter on the front. But the landscape was different in those days.
We have to not forget, Phil, that you cannot compare the landscape today to the landscape we had then.
No, because like I said, the fort was built to conform to the land, but the citadel wasn't. And as I said as well, when this was built, Plymouth Castle went out of use. And it just went into decay. But this only lasted about 65 years, 70 years, and then that went to be, because the innovation of artillery against stone walls and things like that, everything changed. And when we came to the Civil War, they'd already changed again. No more stone castles, earthworks to soak up cannonballs. Just a matter of interest, I don't know if many people know this, but years ago there was a bridge over this area that went over what is now Duttons and down to the waterfront, where soldiers were able to embark onto ships for other theatres. Yeah? Right, we're just having a break here, sitting in the sun on Plymouth Hoe at Dutton's Cafe. Now, to my right, the building itself is an add-on. This was erected in 1847. The date is there. It's above the magazine that I was showing you and talking about earlier. This is the building above it. I wonder if anybody out there has any information on this building and why it was built here. It's got musket slits here as well. These musket slits are everywhere. So it's part of the garrison, but we don't know what it was used for. So if anyone has got any information, please let us know. Thank you. Right, I'm now stood above Fisher's Nose, and if you look along here, there's a wall along here that connects Fisher's Nose with a fortification under the Corinthian Yacht Club. You can just see it there. And this wall, under all this ivy and vegetation, has got arrow slits every so many yards along. So you could walk underneath these. These are connected underneath this ground, underneath this piece of road on the Hoe. Excuse me. You can see from the inside, you'll be able to see out all the way along here, certain parts, for added protection. So you could get soldiers with rifles and muskets here, lining this whole wall. If they could just clean this up, I think you'd be surprised what's in behind here.
If you look at older photographs taken in the 1880s, this is a clean wall.
Yeah, and
As it is now, all the history is hidden behind all of this.
It's preserved in a way, though, Steve.
I suppose so, yes.
Yeah.
It's a lovely day on Plymouth Hoe today. It's beautiful. It's such a lovely day on Plymouth Hoe. The sea sparkling.
Right, Steve, we're at the spot where a few years ago it was popular for people to tombstone off onto the sea below. And if you look over there where they did the tombstoning, you will see the remains of another tower called the Henry VIII Tower on the maps. And that has got some musket slits in the side of the wall down on my left here.
Let's have a look.
Yes. Right, if you look where we are now, we've come around by the Royal Corinthian Yacht Club. This is to the right of the Corinthian Yacht Club, and this is Henry VIII's Tower, one of the fortifications ordered by Henry VIII. You can see it's got 3 slits at the bottom here for cannon, for ordnance, and to the left, a later build, a latter addition, there was 3 musket slits there for riflemen. Now this is to cover this area, which, although it doesn't look much today, is when the tide is out, it's a small beach area. So any force that landed here would be picked off, would be attacked from this area. Now, you can't imagine it now, but this fortification goes around to the other side. It was quite a substantial build for the period. And if you look, this above the rock, that's all new build. When they opened this road, when they built the citadel, this has all been built on. So this area sloped down to the sea, and that building there, that fortification stood alone like a great monolith on the front.
What a sight it would have been, Phil.
Yeah, stood there by itself for years. And it's built of granite and limestone, solid stone, so it stayed. All these centuries it's been there, and it hasn't fallen down yet.
This is from the era of...
Henry VIII.
Now, earlier this morning we were down at Fisher's Nose, and there's a similar construction there.
Yep, all these fortifications were built at the same time.
Would you call it a pyramid type shape?
It looks like a pyramid. It's a strange shape, but they were all different. There were no two the same. If you look at Devil's Point and then Fisher's Nose, Devil's Point, and the artillery tower, that's a multi-angular tower on its own. So I think what they did, they just built each one to their own specifications, the builder's specs. There was no sort of general order to build as there would be now. The blockhouse over at Mount Edgecombe, that's completely different. That's a square design. But if you look, the guns are always low down. And I believe the ones facing the sea were to shoot holes into the hulls of ships.
This is for infantry though, isn't it?
Yeah, this is later. The slits on the side were from infantry.
So these
to fire
3 holes here would be for infantry.
This
landing
side,
on the beach,
yeah. And you've got some set of steps down there as well, if you look.
Yeah, I wonder what that was for.
Yeah, there must have been a way in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Must have been a way in.
Fascinating.
And they've blocked up the caves along the bottom. But all these are connected. A lot of these were connected when they built the citadel. So it's quite a lot of history along the foreshore of Plymouth. Right, here we are by the citadel. This piece of wall in front of the citadel, I believe, is the old fort that Plymouth Fort built in the 1590s. It's a different style than the citadel wall. It's an earlier style. It's not finished so well. It's just finished roughly on this side. A lot of the wall had crenellations, but this piece here has just been left out on its own for no reason. So I believe that this is part of the old, and it forms with a line of the what's the word I'm looking for here? The contours of the land. it falls in with it. It's not been flattened. Whereas if you look at the citadel, it's all flat. But this area here, it's just been built on the hill. So I firmly believe with the style, with the granite and the limestone, as compared to that, that's better finish. This is the original fort.
A beautiful day on Plymouth Hoe. This is the old Corinthian Yacht Club, and we can see here another construction of a pyramid style that's been chopped off at the top. This is another construction from Henry VIII.
Right, when you look at Plymouth now and you see the citadel and what it means to Plymouth and what it did to the landscape up there, you can't imagine it. How before this was built, the rock used to come right down to the seafront. Where we stood now would be open air. It went right down, so all these towers stood alone on the foreshore. Now you look down on them, but in those days you look up to them.
Because of
from
course
this
they're
position.
under our feet, aren't they?
Yes, this was nothing. They filled all this in and built this up and destroyed the foreshore, what it actually looked like, and you'll never get that back now.
What a sight it must have been,
Yes.
seeing those two obelisks
Stood
standing on the rocks.
Yes, and there was more up that way. They
And
were
of
further
course,
up there.
it went all the way along, right
far as
through
Stonehouse.
to Western Kings,
Yes,
which of course
he's right over there.
is right over there and further away.
Right, before any of these buildings were here, Steve, before the citadel, before the fort, this was open area. Lambs used to come up here and graze. And in the turf up here were two cuttings of Gog Magog that could be seen from the sea. These were lost when they built the citadel, which is a shame really, because that's a part of Plymouth's heritage that we won't get back.
So they were essentially artworks.
Artwork, old artwork.
Fabulous.
And if you look in the records, it tells you about when they're cleaning them out, so
And
they
it
did
told-
exist.
It told a fabled story.
Yes. Right, Steve, we're just looking across at Mountbatten Tower, built after the Civil War. And next time we meet, I'll be talking about the Civil War fortifications of Plymouth. Thank you.
Just another lovely day in Plymouth. Absolutely beautiful.